The first time I saw the ocean, I was 7 years old, pressed against the backseat window of our rusted station wagon while my parents argued about gas money. We'd driven 4 hours to visit my mother's sister, the one who'd married well, the one whose beach house gleamed white against the Carolina shore, like a promise I didn't yet understand I was making to myself. That weekend, while my parents drank wine they couldn't afford and performed happiness for relatives who pitied them, I sat on the deck with my feet dangling through the rails, watching waves pull away and return, pull away and return, learning the rhythm of something that knew how to hold its ground. 23 years later, I signed papers for my own place by the water, not Carolina, but further north, where the Atlantic turns gray-green in winter and tourists don't come until June. $480,000, cash, no cosigner, no help, no inheritance I didn't earn with my own hands. The realtor, a woman named Janet who wore pearls even on Tuesday afternoons, kept asking if I was sure I wanted to do this alone. "It's a big house for one person," she said, sliding the paperwork across her mahogany desk. "3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, perfect for a family." I signed my name with the Mont Blanc pen I'd bought myself after my last promotion, the one that cost more than my parents spent on groceries in a month. "It's perfect for me," I told her, and I meant it. The house sat on a 1/4 acre of sandy soil and beach grass, painted the color of driftwood with white trim that needed touching up every spring. The previous owners, a couple in their 70s, had let the garden go wild, Rosa rugosa climbing over broken trellises, sea lavender spreading wherever it pleased. The deck wrapped around 3 sides, weathered but solid, and from the master bedroom window, you could see straight to the horizon. The first night I slept there, on an air mattress in the empty living room because my furniture wouldn't arrive for another week, I listened to the ocean breathing against the shore and thought about that 7-year-old girl dangling her feet toward a future she was already building without knowing it. I didn't tell my family about the house for 3 months. Not out of spite, though they'd assume that later, but out of something harder to name. Protection, maybe, or just the simple desire to have something that was mine before it became theirs to comment on, to judge, to claim. I knew how my mother would purse her lips at the price, how my father would walk through, calculating what I must make now, what I should be sending home instead. I knew how my brother Danny would sprawl on my couch like he owned it, leaving beer cans on my coffee table, sand from his shoes ground into my rugs. But you can't hide forever from the people who made you, even when you've remade yourself into someone they don't recognize. The call came in October, my mother's voice sharp with hurt I hadn't caused but would be held responsible for anyway. "Susan from church saw you," she said without preamble, "at a hardware store in Rockport buying paint. She said you looked like you were fixing up a place." I was standing in my kitchen, the one with subway tile backsplash I'd installed myself over 3 weekends, watching storm clouds gather over the water. I was. "Were you planning to tell us you moved?" The accusation in her voice was familiar as my own heartbeat. Everything I did without their input was a betrayal. Every boundary I set was a wall built specifically to hurt them. I'd learned long ago that defending myself only gave them more ammunition, so I went with simple facts. "I bought a house, on the water about an hour north of you." The silence stretched like taffy. I could picture her standing in their kitchen with its peeling linoleum and cabinet doors that didn't quite close, processing this information, calculating its meaning in the economy of our family, where everything was measured against what someone else had or didn't have. "You bought a house," she repeated it slowly, tasting each word. "Must be nice, having that kind of money. Must be nice, not having to worry about anyone but yourself." There it was. The knife slipped between ribs so smoothly you almost didn't feel it going in. I'd been sending them money for 15 years, 500 here, 1,000 there, covering their credit card bills when my father's hours got cut, paying for Danny's rehab twice, his court fees once. But gratitude was a foreign currency in our family. Help wasn't remembered, only its absence was counted. "I'd love to have you up to see it," I said, sidestepping the blade. "Maybe next weekend?" She softened then, the way she always did when offered something. "Well, I suppose we could do that. Danny's been having a hard time, lost another job. It would be good for him to get away. Danny was always having a hard time. At 32, he'd perfected the art of failing in ways that weren't quite his fault. The economy was bad. His boss had it out for him. His ex-girlfriend had messed with his head. He lived in my parents' basement, emerging periodically to ask for loans he'd never repay, to make promises he'd never keep. I loved him the way you love a bruise, tenderly, but wishing it would heal. "Sure," I said, "bring Danny." That first visit, I watched them walk through my home like archaeologists discovering evidence of a civilization they didn't understand. My mother ran her fingers along the granite countertops, opened and closed the soft-closed drawers in the kitchen, stood in the master bathroom with its clawfoot tub and rainfall shower, saying nothing but calculating everything. My father checked the windows, the furnace, the foundation, looking for flaws that would prove I'd been foolish, that I needed their guidance even now. Danny sprawled on my sectional sofa, his work boots still on, sand scattering across my Persian rug. "This place must have cost a fortune," he said, and it wasn't a compliment. "Fair market value," I replied, pouring wine I knew they'd criticize as too expensive, using glasses they'd say were too fancy. My mother stood at the sliding glass doors that opened onto the deck, watching the waves. "All this space," she said softly, "seems like such a waste for one person." "I like the space," I said. She turned to look at me, and there was something in her eyes I recognized but had never named, a kind of hunger, maybe, or resentment dressed as concern. "Family should share their good fortune," she said. "That's how we raised you." "No," I thought, but didn't say. "You raised me to give until I had nothing left, to apologize for having anything at all. You raised me to be the one who never needed help, so I could always be available to give it." But I just smiled and refilled her wine glass, and we all pretended that was enough. The second visit came 3 weeks later, unannounced. I was in my office, the smallest bedroom I'd converted into a workspace with built-in bookshelves and a desk facing the window, when I heard car doors slamming in my driveway. Through the window, I watched my parents help Danny unload boxes from their trunk. "What's going on?" I called from the front door. My mother didn't even look up. "Danny needs a place to stay for a while, just temporary, until he gets back on his feet." The boxes kept coming, his guitar, his PlayStation, a duffel bag that looked like it held everything he owned, which it probably did. My father avoided my eyes as he carried in a milk crate full of sneakers. "We didn't discuss this," I said. Now my mother looked at me, and her face was arranged in an expression of wounded disbelief. "Discuss? He's your brother. Family doesn't need permission to help each other. This is my home. That you have all to yourself while your brother is struggling." She set down the box she was carrying, and I saw it was full of his dirty laundry. "I thought we raised you better than this. I thought we raised you to have a heart." Danny stood by the car, smoking, not even pretending to help anymore. He caught my eye and shrugged, a gesture that could mean anything or nothing, the same shrug he'd given when he crashed my first car, when he stole money from my purse at my college graduation, when he showed up high to our grandfather's funeral. "Danny," I called, "did you want to move in here?" He flicked his cigarette into my garden. "Mom said it would be good for me, the sea air and shit." "That's not what I asked." He shrugged again. "I mean, if you're offering." "I'm not." The words hung in the salt air between us. My mother's face went through several expressions: shock, hurt, rage, before settling on the one I knew best: martyrdom. "I can't believe this," she said, her voice climbing. "Your own brother. Your own flesh and blood, and you're turning him away like he's nobody." "I'm not turning him away. I'm saying he can't live here." "What's the difference?" This from my father, finally joining the conversation. "You've got 3 bedrooms, 3, and you want your brother on the street?" "He's not on the street. He lives with you." "We can't support him forever," my mother snapped. "We're not rich like you, remember? We don't have beach houses and fancy wine and whatever else you spend your money on instead of helping your family." There was so much I could have said about the $10,000 I'd given them last year alone, about the car insurance I still paid for Danny, about the childhood bedroom I'd shared with him until I was 16 because we couldn't afford a bigger place, how I'd done my homework in the bathroom because it was the only room with a door that locked, about the scholarship I'd earned, the 3 jobs I'd worked through college, the 70-hour weeks I still pulled, about how being rich meant I had enough boundaries to keep what I earned. Instead, I walked to Danny's boxes and picked one up. "These can't stay here." "You're really doing this?" My mother's voice had gone quiet, which was worse than screaming. "You're really choosing your precious house over your family?" "I'm choosing to have boundaries." "Boundaries." She spit the word like it tasted bitter. "That's what you call selfishness now? Boundaries?" Danny finally moved, taking the box from my hands. "It's fine, Mom. I didn't even want to live this far from town anyway." But she wasn't done. She followed me as I walked back to my front door, her voice rising with each step. "You think you're better than us. You've always thought that, even as a kid, walking around with your nose in a book, acting like you were too good for your own family." "I never said that." "You didn't have to. It was all over your face every time you looked at us, like we embarrassed you, like we weren't enough." I turned to face her, and for once I didn't soften my expression. "You weren't enough. You weren't enough to protect me from him when he stole from me. You weren't enough to celebrate when I graduated summa cum laude because Danny had just failed out of community college and needed attention. You weren't enough to say congratulations when I got promoted to VP because Dad's hours had been cut and you needed money. You were never enough when it came to me, but I was always supposed to be everything for you." The silence that followed felt like the moment after lightning strikes, when you're waiting for the thunder. My father's face had gone red. Danny was already back at the car, scrolling through his phone. But my mother looked at me like I was a stranger. "I don't know who you are anymore," she said quietly. "You never did," I replied, and went inside. They loaded the boxes back into the car while I watched from my office window. Part of me wanted to run out, to apologize, to offer Danny the guest room for just a few weeks. The part of me that was still 7 years old, trying to be good enough to be loved instead of just useful. But I stayed where I was, my hands flat on my desk, breathing in and out with the waves until their car disappeared down the coastal road. The peace lasted exactly 4 days. I came home from a client dinner in Boston to find my garage door open and boxes stacked inside. Different boxes this time, Danny's entire life, apparently, packed and labeled in my mother's careful handwriting. Danny's winter clothes, Danny's books, electronics, fragile. A mattress leaned against the wall, still wrapped in plastic. My hands shook as I called her. She answered on the first ring, which meant she'd been waiting. "Before you say anything," she started, "just listen. We're not asking for much. He doesn't even have to come inside if you're going to be like this. He can stay in the garage. We'll fix it up nice, put in a space heater. He won't bother you at all." "You broke into my garage." "We didn't break in. You gave us the code, remember?" I had, months ago, when I'd first moved in and thought maybe this time could be different. Maybe owning my own space would change the dynamics somehow. Maybe they'd respect what I'd built if they could see it, touch it, understand what I'd worked for. I'd been wrong, but I'd been wrong about them my whole life, so why should this be different? "The code is changing tonight. The boxes need to be gone by tomorrow." "You can't be serious?" "I'm calling a locksmith in the morning." "If the boxes are still here, I'm calling the police." "The police? On your own family?" Her voice broke on the last word, and I knew she was crying. My mother cried the way other people breathed, constantly, effortlessly. "You entered my property without permission and left items I explicitly said couldn't be here. What would you call that?" "I'd call it a mother trying to help her son and a daughter too heartless to care." I hung up. Then I went to my laptop and changed the garage code, ordered new locks for all my doors from a 24-hour service, and poured myself a glass of the expensive wine they hated. I sat on my deck in the cold October air, listening to the ocean claim and reclaim the shore, and tried not to think about what I was losing. Or maybe what I'd never had. The locksmith came at 7 the next morning. The boxes were gone, but there was a note taped to my door in Danny's handwriting. Thanks for nothing. I crumpled it up and threw it in the garbage with the old locks. For 2 weeks, silence. I'd grown up with my mother's silences, which were weapons she wielded with surgical precision. This one felt different, though. Final. I went to work, came home to my empty house, walked the beach at sunset, and told myself this was what I'd wanted: peace, space, freedom from the constant pull of their need. Then Danny called. It was late, past midnight, and I knew before I answered that something was wrong. Danny only called when something was wrong. "I'm at the hospital," he said without preamble. "Mom had a heart attack." The drive to the hospital took 40 minutes. I made it in 30, speeding down the dark coastal road with my hands gripped white on the steering wheel. Not because I was rushing to reconcile, but because, despite everything, she was still my mother. You can build all the boundaries in the world, but blood doesn't respect property lines. She was awake when I got there, pale and small in the hospital bed, hooked to machines that beeped with mechanical indifference. My father sat beside her, holding her hand. Danny was in the corner, playing on his phone. "You came," she said, and sounded surprised. "Of course I came." We sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the machines and Danny's game, tinny and absurd in the sterile room. Finally, my mother spoke. "The doctor says it was stress-related." I waited for the accusation, the pointed look, the implication that my heartlessness had quite literally broken hers. But she just stared at the ceiling. "I've been stressed my whole life," she continued. "Worried about money, about your father's job, about Danny, about you, though you probably don't believe that." "Mom?" "No, let me finish." She turned to look at me, and for once there were no tears, no performance. "I've been so angry at you for having what we don't, for not sharing it, for being able to say no." "I've helped." "I know you have. I know about the money, the bills you've paid. Your father doesn't, but I do. I know, and I hated you for it anyway. Because you could give it, because you had it to give, because you made something of yourself, while Danny—" She looked at him, still absorbed in his game. "Danny's just like us, and you're not." It wasn't an apology, but it was maybe the closest thing to honesty we'd ever shared. "I worked for it," I said quietly. "Everything I have, I worked for it." "I know that too, but it's easier to be angry than proud. Pride means admitting we failed somewhere, that we didn't give you what you needed to become who you are." My father shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Danny had finally put down his phone and was listening. "You didn't fail," I said, though we both knew it wasn't entirely true. "We just wanted different things." She closed her eyes. "That house, your house, it's beautiful. Thank you." I was so jealous when I saw it, not just of the house, but of what it meant, that you could buy it alone, that you didn't need anyone. Everyone needs someone, but not us. You don't need us. I wanted to deny it, to offer some comfort, but she was right. I'd built a life that didn't require them, and that was the greatest betrayal of all in a family that measured love by dependency. Danny spoke for the first time. "I didn't want to live there anyway." We all looked at him. "In your house," he clarified. "Mom kept pushing, saying it would be good for me, that you owed it to us. But I didn't want to. It's too quiet there. Too—" he struggled for the word. "Too finished. Everything in its place. I'd just mess it up." "You wouldn't," I started, but he cut me off. "Yeah, I would. I mess everything up. That's what I do." He said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "Mom thinks if she can fix my life, it'll mean she was a good mother. Dad thinks if I succeed, it'll mean he was a good father. But maybe I'm just a fuck-up, and that's okay." "Danny," my mother said, but he shook his head. "It's true, and we all know it. Sarah got out. She worked her ass off and got out, and we hate her for it, because it means we could have too, if we'd tried. But trying is scary. It's easier to be mad at the one who did it than admit we didn't." The room fell silent again. A nurse came in to check my mother's vitals, and we all pretended to be a normal family, having a normal visit. When she left, my mother reached for my hand. "I want to see it again," she said. Your house, when I get out of here. But really see it this time. Not looking for what's wrong or what you should share, just to see what you built." "I'd like that," I said, and meant it. She squeezed my hand, then let go. "But Danny's not moving in." "Jesus, Mom, we covered this," Danny said, but he was almost smiling. I stayed until morning, dozing in the uncomfortable chair while my father snored and Danny played games on his phone. When the sun came through the hospital windows, I drove home to my house by the sea, made coffee in my expensive machine, and sat on my deck watching the waves. For the first time since I'd bought the place, it felt like home, not because I'd defended it, but because I'd finally stopped apologizing for it. My mother came to visit 3 weeks later, after she'd been discharged and cleared by her cardiologist. Just her, not my father or Danny. She called first, asked if it was a good time. We were both trying on new behaviors like ill-fitting clothes, but we were trying. She moved through my house differently this time, really looking instead of calculating. She noticed things she'd missed before, the photograph of our family from when Danny and I were kids, framed and hanging in the hallway. The quilt her mother had made, folded at the foot of my guest bed. The pottery bowl she'd given me for college graduation, holding fruit on my kitchen counter. "You kept it all," she said, touching the bowl gently. Of course I did. We sat on the deck with tea, watching the November ocean churn gray and moody. The silence between us wasn't comfortable exactly, but it wasn't weaponized either. "I've been thinking," she said finally, "about boundaries." I waited. I looked it up, what it means. I thought it meant keeping people out, but it doesn't, does it? It means deciding what comes in. Something like that. She nodded, pulling her cardigan tighter against the wind. I wasn't good at that. Boundaries. I let everything in. Your father's moods, Danny's problems, my own fears, and then I tried to push it all onto you, because you were the strong one. I wasn't strong. I was just quiet. "No," she said firmly. "You were strong, are strong. You learned how to say no, and that's the hardest thing in the world." We watched a seagull fight the wind, determined to go somewhere despite the resistance. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, "for the garage, for trying to force Danny on you, for years of things I can't even name." "Thank you," I said, because what else was there to say? Forgiveness would come or it wouldn't, but acknowledgement was a start. She visited once a month after that, always calling first, always alone. We were relearning each other, or maybe learning for the first time who we were outside the roles we'd been assigned. She started seeing a therapist, something she'd called self-indulgent her whole life. I started answering her calls without checking my bank balance first, wondering what she'd need. Danny got a job at a marina, nothing fancy, but he kept it. He moved out of my parents' basement into a studio apartment above a bait shop. It smelled like fish and had one window, but it was his. He came to my house once, brought a 6-pack of beer and drank it on my deck while telling me about a girl he'd met, someone who didn't know his history, who looked at him like he might be worth something. "Don't fuck it up," I said, and he laughed. "I'll try not to." My father was the last to come around, and even then it was sideways. He showed up one Saturday in March with his toolbox, said he'd noticed my deck needed some boards replaced. We worked in silence for hours, him showing me how to identify rot, how to measure and cut and seal. When we were done, he stood back and surveyed our work. "It's a good house," he said. "Solid bones." "Thank you." "You did good, Sarah." It was the first time he'd ever said those words to me. I had to turn away, pretend to be studying the ocean while my eyes burned with salt that wasn't from the sea. Spring came eventually, the way it always does at the shore, reluctant and then all at once. The Rosa rugosa I'd cut back bloomed pink and wild. The sea lavender returned, softer than before. I hired someone to repair the trellises, planted a garden of herbs and hardy perennials that could withstand the salt air. On weekends, I left my doors open, let the ocean wind blow through my rooms, rearranging the carefully controlled environment I'd created. One evening in May, I had them all over for dinner, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. We ate on the deck, grilled fish and vegetables from my garden, drank wine that wasn't too expensive but wasn't cheap either. Danny told stories about the marina, the boats that came through, the ridiculous names rich people gave their yachts. My father talked about a restoration project he was doing for a local church. My mother mentioned her therapist had suggested she take up painting, and we all carefully didn't make a big deal about it. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange I'd never get tired of watching, my mother said, "This is nice." "Yeah," Danny agreed. "It's like we're a normal family or something." "We were never normal," I said, and for the first time it didn't sound like an accusation. "No," my mother agreed, "but maybe that's okay." After they left, I stood in my kitchen, loading the dishwasher, looking at the evidence of family, the extra plates, the wine glasses with different lipstick marks, Danny's beer bottles that he'd actually put in the recycling this time. It wasn't what I'd imagined when I bought this house, this careful negotiation of space and boundaries, this slow reconstruction of relationships I'd thought were foundational but turned out to be built on sand. But maybe that was the point. Maybe you had to tear down the old structures to build something that could actually bear weight. Maybe you had to say no before yes could mean anything. I finished cleaning, turned off the lights, and went to sit on my newly repaired deck. The ocean was calm, just the steady rhythm of waves meeting shore, pulling away, returning. Always returning, but on their own terms, in their own time. I thought about that 7-year-old girl, feet dangling toward a future she couldn't imagine, and felt something that might have been gratitude. Not for the struggle, but for surviving it, for building something from it. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Thank you for tonight. I love you." I typed back, "I love you too." And for the first time in my life, I meant it without disclaimer, without resentment, without calculating the cost. Love didn't require the dissolution of boundaries. It required them. It needed edges to define its shape, walls to give it structure, doors that could open and close. That night, I fell asleep to the ocean, in my house that I'd bought with my own money, my own work, my own determination to have something that nobody could take away. Not because I was heartless, but because I'd learned that having a heart meant protecting it, tending it, choosing carefully what to let in and what to keep out. The next morning, there was a storm warning on the radio. High winds, possible flooding in low-lying areas. I went around securing outdoor furniture, bringing in the potted plants, battening down for weather. My mother called to make sure I was prepared, and I assured her I was. I'd weathered worse. The storm hit that evening, rain lashing sideways against my windows, wind howling like something wounded. I sat in my living room with a book and a glass of wine, listening to my house creak and groan, but hold. Around midnight, the power went out. I lit candles, wrapped myself in my grandmother's quills, and watched the darkness outside fight with itself. Danny texted, "You okay?" "Fine," I replied. "You?" "Apartment's shaking like hell, but hanging in. This girl I'm seeing is here. She thinks it's romantic." "Don't fuck it up," I texted back. "Trying not to," he responded with a laughing emoji. My father called, even though it was late. "Your mother's worried about you over there alone." "I'm good, Dad. House is solid." "Good bones," he agreed. "Call if you need anything." "I will," I said, though we both knew I wouldn't. The storm passed by dawn, leaving the beach littered with seaweed and driftwood, treasures and trash in equal measure. I walked the rack line as the sun came up, picking through what the ocean had surrendered. A perfect whelk shell, unbroken. Sea glass, green and smooth. A child's plastic shovel, probably lost the summer before. I thought about my family, each in their own space, weathering their own storms. We weren't the Hallmark movie family who'd come together in crisis and suddenly understand each other perfectly. We were messier than that, more broken, more real. But we were trying, each in our own way, to build something better from the wreckage of what we'd been. A month later, Danny brought his girlfriend to meet me. Her name was Lisa, and she was nothing like the women he usually dated. Quiet, steady, with a job as a veterinary technician, and eyes that didn't look through him, but at him. She admired her house without envy, helped with dishes without being asked, laughed at Danny's jokes, but also called him on his bullshit. I liked her immediately. "She's too good for you," I told him while she was in the bathroom. "I know," he said, and for once there was no shrug, no deflection. "I'm trying to be worth it." "Good," I said. "Keep trying." My mother started painting that summer, terrible seascapes at first,
all muddy blues and browns. But she kept at it, taking classes at the community center, watching YouTube tutorials on her tablet. By August, she'd produced something that actually looked like the ocean. Not my ocean, not perfectly, but her interpretation of it, emotional and turbulent and beautiful in its own way. "I want to paint your house," she announced one day. "It doesn't need painting," I said, confused. "No, I want to paint a picture of it, to have, to remember." So she set up her easel in my garden, spending hours getting the light right, the shadows, the way the Rosa Rugosa framed the front door. The painting, when she finished it, wasn't technically perfect, but it captured something true. A house that was lived in, loved, defended, and finally peacefully inhabited. I hung it in my office where I could see it while I worked. Sometimes, when I was stuck on a problem or tired from a long day, I'd look at that painting and see my house through my mother's eyes, not as something I'd kept from them, but something I'd built that could shelter us all in careful doses on negotiated terms. Labor Day weekend, we had what Danny called the first annual family beach day that nobody fights during. It was ambitious branding, but we made it through with only minor tensions. My father grilled, my mother painted, Danny and Lisa threw a football in the surf. I mostly watched, feeling like an anthropologist studying a species I belonged to but didn't quite understand. "You look happy," Lisa said, dropping down beside me on the sand. "Do I?" "Yeah, relaxed. Danny says you weren't always." "Danny's right." She nodded, watching him attempt to catch a pass and faceplant in the shallow water instead. "He talks about you a lot, how you got out, made something of yourself. He's proud of you, you know, even if he's also jealous." "I know," I said, and I did. Finally, "He's trying," she said, "to be better, to be more like you." "He doesn't need to be like me. He needs to be like himself, just at a 1.0, functional." She laughed. "I'll settle for functional." That night, after everyone had gone home, I found a beer bottle Danny had left behind. Not carelessly this time, but placed deliberately on the deck railing with a note underneath. "Thanks for not giving up on us." I kept the note, threw away the bottle, but kept the note. Fall came again, my second in the house. This time I knew what to expect. The way the light would slant gold through my windows, the storms that would strip the garden bare, the quiet that would settle over the shore as summer people retreated to their real lives. I prepared differently this time, not just battening down, but opening up. I invited my mother to help me put the garden to bed for winter. Let my father show me how to properly seal the windows. Had Danny and Lisa over for Sunday dinners, teaching her my grandmother's recipes, while he pretended to help but mostly just ate ingredients. The holiday season approached with its usual freight of complicated feelings. Thanksgiving had always been a minefield in our family. My mother cooking for days, my father complaining about the expense, Danny showing up late or drunk or both, me trying to hold it all together with sheer will and good manners. But this year, my mother called with a proposition. "Let's do it at your house," she said. "Let me cook there. Your kitchen is bigger, and, I don't know, maybe neutral territory would be good." It wasn't neutral, not really. It was my territory, hard-won and carefully maintained. But I said yes anyway, because that's what you do when your mother is trying. You meet her halfway, even when halfway means letting her rearrange your spice rack and criticize your knife collection. She arrived the day before Thanksgiving with bags of groceries and a determined expression. We cooked side by side, not talking much, finding a rhythm we'd never had when I was young. She taught me things I'd never known, how she got her gravy smooth, why she added apple to the stuffing, the secret to her pie crust that I'd never been able to replicate. "My mother taught me," she said, showing me how to fold the butter into the flour. "Your grandmother." She was a hard woman, harder than me. Never said she was proud of anything I did. I swore I'd be different with my kids. "You were different," I said carefully. "Not different enough." She kept working the dough, not looking at me. "I said I was proud, but then I'd take it back somehow, make it conditional, make it about me." "You did your best." She laughed, but not bitterly. "No, I didn't. None of us did our best. We did what we could manage, and sometimes that wasn't much." "It was enough," I said.
and she looked at me then, flower in her hair, doubt in her eyes. Was it? We're here, aren't we? Still trying? She nodded, went back to the dough. Your house makes more sense now, she said after a while. Why you needed it. Why you couldn't let us in at first. I let you in, just on my terms. That's what I mean. You learned what I never did, how to have something that's yours without apology. Thanksgiving Day arrived gray and cold, the ocean choppy with whitecaps. Danny and Lisa arrived first, bringing wine and a centerpiece she'd made. My father came last, having stopped to help a neighbor with a broken gate. We sat around my dining room table, the one I'd bought from an estate sale and refinished myself, and attempted grace. I'm thankful, my mother started, then stopped, started again. I'm thankful we're all here, together, that we figured out how to be a family without destroying each other. Barely, Danny added, but he was smiling. I'm thankful for second chances, my father said quietly. Third chances, however many it takes. I'm thankful I met this weirdo, Lisa said, elbowing Danny, and his weird family. Thanks, babe, Danny said. I'm thankful for, I don't know, for Sarah not giving up on us, for having a sister who showed me it's possible to be better than where you come from. They all looked at me. Outside, waves crashed against the shore, the sound I'd fallen asleep to for over a year now, the sound that had become the backing track to my life. I'm thankful for boundaries, I said finally, and for learning that they're not walls. They're just lines in the sand. You can redraw them when you need to. That's very poetic, Danny said, and very you. Shut up and eat, I told him, and we did. After dinner, while the others watched football, my mother and I stood at the kitchen sink doing dishes. She washed, I dried, a rhythm we'd established decades ago. I owe you an apology, she said suddenly. You already apologized. No, a real one, specific. She handed me a plate, waited until I dried it. When you were 16, you won that writing contest, the one with the scholarship money. You were so excited, and I made it about Danny, about how he was struggling in school and didn't need to see you succeeding. I made you dim your light so his darkness wouldn't show as much. That was wrong. I remembered that day, coming home with the certificate, the check for $500 that had seemed like a fortune, her face falling as she read it, the immediate pivot to Danny's latest crisis. How I'd put the certificate in a drawer and never mentioned it again. That money went to my college fund, I said. It should have gone to celebration, to making you feel seen. She scrubbed at a pan that was already clean. I see you now. The life you built despite us, maybe because of us in some backwards way, but mostly despite. Mom, no, let me finish. I spent so many years being angry that you had what I didn't. I never stopped to be amazed that you got it. My daughter bought a house by the ocean. My daughter is a vice president at 33. My daughter is successful and independent and everything I was too scared to even dream of being. And instead of being proud, I was threatened. That's on me, not you. I put down the dish towel, turned to face her. I needed you to be proud, even when I said I didn't. I know, I'm proud now, late, but here. We hugged then, awkward and careful, two women who'd spent a lifetime misunderstanding each other, trying to find a new way forward. Winter descended properly in December, the kind of cold that made the house creak and the ocean look like hammered metal. I spent Christmas Eve alone, by choice, sitting by my fireplace with a book and a glass of good scotch, feeling the particular peace that comes from solitude you've chosen rather than solitude that's chosen you. Christmas Day, I went to my parents' house, bringing presents and boundaries in equal measure. I stayed for exactly 3 hours, kissed everyone goodbye, and drove home to my quiet house by the sea. Danny called that night, drunk but happy. "Lisa's pregnant," he said. "What?" I know. We've only been together 8 months, but I'm happy. Scared shitless, but happy. Danny, I'm going to be better, he said, and for the first time in our lives, I believed him. I'm going to be the kind of father who shows up, who tries, who doesn't make his kids pay for his mistakes. I know you will, I said, and meant it. The baby was born in August, a girl they named Emma. I stood in the hospital room, holding my niece, this tiny, perfect person who didn't know yet about generational trauma or family dysfunction or the weight of other people's expectations. She just knew warmth and milk and the sound of her parents' voices. "She looks like you," my mother said, peering over my shoulder, "around the eyes." "She looks like herself," I corrected, but gently. Danny was different as a father, focused in a way I'd never seen him, careful with his hands that had always been careless, protective of the small life he'd helped create. Lisa was patient with his learning curve, firm with his backsliding, supportive without enabling. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment closer to my house, and I became Aunt Sarah, who babysat on Tuesday nights and bought too many books, and taught Emma the names of shells and seabirds before she could even walk. My house became what I'd never imagined it could be, a gathering place, but on my terms. Sunday dinners when I felt like cooking, holiday celebrations that ended when I was ready for them to end, a guest room that was actually used by guests who actually left when they said they would. The boundaries I'd fought so hard to establish had become invisible but understood, like the property lines that defined my land. You couldn't see them, but everyone knew where they were. One evening in September, just after Emma's first birthday, I sat on my deck watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. My mother was in my kitchen, teaching Lisa her mother's recipe for soup. My father and Danny were in the garage, working on a rocking chair they were building for Emma. The baby herself was asleep in the porta-crib I'd set up in my guest room, tiny fists curled like shells. I thought about that long ago day when they'd tried to move Danny into my house, the fury I'd felt, the determination to keep what was mine. I'd been right to say no then, but being right wasn't the same as being finished. Sometimes you had to say no before you could say yes and mean it. Sometimes you had to close all the doors before you could choose which ones to open. My phone buzzed with a text from a colleague asking about a report due Monday. I looked at it, then deleted it without responding. Work could wait. This, my family and my house, together but not enmeshed, close but not suffocating, this was what I'd been building toward without knowing it. Danny came out onto the deck, sawdust in his hair. "Dad's a perfectionist," he said, dropping into the chair beside me. "Every joint has to be perfect. It's just a rocking chair." "It's not just anything when it's for Emma." "Yeah." He was quiet for a moment. "I get it now. Why you fought so hard for this place, for your space. I used to think you were selfish, but I have Emma now, and if anyone tried to take advantage of her or make her feel like she had to give up everything for everyone else," he shook his head, "I'd burn the world down." "You don't have to burn anything down. You just have to say no." "You make it sound easy." "It's not easy, it's just necessary." He nodded, watched the waves roll in. "I'm glad you did it. Said no to us, I mean. Made us figure our own shit out. We needed that." "You needed a lot of things." "Yeah, but not your house. We needed to learn how to stand on our own feet. Mom and Dad are even going to therapy now, together. Can you believe that?" I could, actually. People could change when staying the same became more painful than growing. It had taken a heart attack, a new grandchild, and a daughter who wouldn't budge, but they were trying. We all were. "I'm proud of you," I told Danny, "for stepping up, for being a good father." "I'm trying," he said. "Every day, I'm trying." That's all any of us can do. Lisa called us in for dinner then. My mother's soup and fresh bread, a salad from my garden. We ate at my dining room table, Emma in her high chair throwing Cheerios, my parents bickering gently about the chair construction, Lisa and Danny exchanging the exhausted but happy looks of new parents. I sat at the head of my own table, in my own house, with my family around me by choice, not obligation. After they all left, I cleaned up slowly, not minding the mess for once. Evidence of life lived, of relationships rebuilt on better foundations. I found one of Emma's toys under the couch, a stuffed octopus Danny had bought her. I put it in the basket I kept for her things, the small collection of baby paraphernalia that marked my house as a place where family was welcome, if not resident. The second anniversary of buying my house came in October. I celebrated alone, walking the beach at dawn, coffee in hand, remembering that first night on the air mattress when everything had been empty and full of possibility at the same time. The house was different now, more lived in, less perfect. There were scratches on the hardwood from Emma's walker, a stain on the sectional from Danny's spilled beer, a chip in my grandmother's bowl from when my mother had dropped it and cried like the world was ending until I showed her how it didn't matter, that things could be imperfect and still be beautiful. That evening, my mother called. "I wanted to thank you," she said without preamble. "For what?" "For teaching me how to have boundaries. I know that sounds backwards, but watching you do it, seeing how it made you stronger, not meaner, I learned. Your father and I, we're better now. We don't take everything on. We don't make everything our responsibility. We're learning to let people handle their own lives." "That's good, Mom." "It's hard. God, it's hard. Every instinct I have says to fix, to manage, to control. But I'm learning. Therapy helps. Having Emma helps. I want to be a better grandmother than I was a mother." "You weren't a bad mother." "I wasn't a good one either. But that's okay. I'm a better one now, even if it's late." "It's not too late," I said, and meant it. November brought the first real storm of the season, a nor'easter that had the weather people excited and everyone else stocking up on batteries and bread. I prepared my house, storm shutters, emergency supplies, everything secured. My father called to make sure I was ready, offering to come help, but I told him I had it handled. "I know you do," he said. "Just checking, being a dad." "Thanks, Dad." The storm hit that night, worse than predicted. Wind that shook the walls, rain that fell sideways, the ocean invading the land with a fury that reminded everyone who was really in charge. I lost power around midnight, lit candles, made tea on my camping stove, and sat in my living room listening to my house prove its worth. It creaked and groaned, but held, the way well-built things do. Around 2 a.m, someone pounded on my door. I opened it to find Danny, soaking wet, wild-eyed. "The apartment flooded," he said. "Lisa and Emma are in the car. Can we—" "Get them inside," I said, already moving to get towels. They stayed for 3 days while their apartment dried out. It should have been awkward, should have triggered all my old anxieties about invasion and boundary crossing, but it wasn't, and it didn't. Danny was helpful without being asked, fixing a cabinet door that had been sticking, taking out trash, keeping his stuff contained to the guest room. Lisa cooked and cleaned up after herself, respectful of my space and routines. Emma crawled around discovering new corners, delighted by the stairs, the way sunlight fell through different windows than she was used to. "Thank you," Lisa said on the last morning, Emma on her hip, "for opening your home. Danny said you didn't always, that it was hard for you, having people in your space." "It was," I admitted. "Sometimes it still is. But family isn't about always being comfortable. It's about choosing to make room when it matters." "Still," she said, "thank you." After they left, I walked through my house, noting the small evidences of their stay. A pacifier under the coffee table, one of Danny's socks behind the bathroom door, Lisa's handwriting on my grocery list adding items she'd replaced. Once, these traces would have felt like violations. Now they felt like life. Messy, imperfect, real. Christmas came again, my third in the house. This time I hosted everyone. My parents, Danny and Lisa and Emma, even Lisa's parents who were visiting from Ohio. My house full of people, noise, chaos. My mother and Lisa's mother competing over who could be more helpful in the kitchen. The fathers discussing some sports thing I didn't care about. Emma pulling ornaments off the tree as fast as we could hang them. Danny trying to assemble a toy that had approximately 10,000 pieces and instructions in broken English. At one point, overwhelmed, I stepped out onto my deck despite the cold. The ocean was calm, just the steady breathing of waves. I could hear laughter from inside, see warm light spilling from my windows onto the dark beach. This was what I'd been so afraid of, letting them in, letting them fill my space, letting them make it theirs too. But it wasn't mine becoming theirs, it was mine becoming ours, selectively, temporarily, by invitation only. My mother found me there. "You okay?" "Yeah, just needed air." She stood beside me, looking at the water. "It's a beautiful house, Sarah, but you know what makes it beautiful? It's not the granite counters or the ocean view. It's that you fought for it, that you knew what you needed and didn't let anyone convince you otherwise." "Even you?" "Especially me," she laughed. God knows I tried. But you held your ground. And look, we all survived it. We're better for it. Are we? Danny's sober, working, being a father. Your dad's in therapy, learning to talk about feelings at 63.
I'm painting, seeing my own therapist, learning who I am when I'm not trying to control everyone. And you have your house, your life, your boundaries, and you still let us in. When I choose to. Exactly, when you choose to. That's what makes it mean something. We went back inside together, into the warmth and chaos. Emma had chocolate on her face and one of my throw pillows. Danny was still fighting with the toy. Lisa's father was telling some long story about his time in the Navy. My father was actually laughing. The tree was leaning slightly to the left, half its ornaments on the floor. It was nothing like the pristine Christmases I'd imagined when I bought the house. It was so much better. That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat in my living room surrounded by the detritus of family. Wrapping paper, wine glasses, Emma's toys, someone's forgotten scarf. The house felt different, expanded somehow, like it had stretched to accommodate more than I'd thought it could hold. I didn't clean up, just sat there, feeling something I couldn't quite name. Satisfaction, maybe? Or peace? Or just the simple recognition that I'd built something strong enough to share. New Year's Eve, I stood on my deck at midnight, champagne in hand, watching fireworks bloom over the harbor in the distance. My phone buzzed with texts, my parents, Danny, friends from work, each wishing me happiness in the coming year. I thought about resolutions, about what I wanted from the next 12 months, but couldn't think of anything I needed that I didn't already have. A house that was mine, a family that respected my boundaries, the knowledge that love didn't require sacrifice of self, that you could be part of something without losing yourself in it. January was quiet, the way January should be. I worked, walked the beach, had dinner with Danny and Lisa and Emma once a week. My mother came for tea on Saturdays, bringing new paintings to show me, getting better each time. My father fixed things around my house without being asked, a dripping faucet, a squeaky hinge, small offerings of care that didn't demand reciprocation. One evening, sorting through old papers, I found the note Danny had left when I changed the locks. Thanks for nothing. I almost threw it away, then didn't. It was part of the story, the ugly part that made the rest meaningful. You couldn't appreciate the light without remembering the darkness. February brought another storm, this one unexpected, catching everyone off guard. I was at work when it hit, tried to drive home, but had to pull over when the visibility dropped to nothing. I called Danny. "Where are you?" he asked. I told him, "Stay there, I'm coming." "Danny, no." "I'm already in the truck, don't move." He found me 20 minutes later, his truck better equipped for the storm than my sedan. We drove to my house slowly, carefully, not talking much. When we got there, he came inside, made sure I had everything I needed, then headed for the door. "You can stay," I said, "until it passes." "Nah, Lisa's waiting, but thanks." He paused at the door. "You know, I used to think you didn't need anyone, that you'd built this perfect life where you were completely self-sufficient. But that's not it, is it? You need people. You just choose which ones, and when, and how." "Something like that." "It's better," he said. "Your way. Harder, but better." After he left, I thought about need versus want. I'd needed my family when I was young, dependent on them for survival.
Now, I wanted them, sometimes, in doses I could control. It was a healthier kind of love, one that could survive distance and disagreement. Spring came slowly, reluctantly, winter holding on with icy fingers well into March. But eventually, inevitably, the world warmed. I planted my garden again, this time with Emma helping, which mostly meant eating dirt and pulling up seedlings I'd just planted. My mother painted the scene, me kneeling in the dirt, Emma in her sun hat, the house in the background, the ocean beyond. "This one's my favorite," she said, showing me the finished painting. "Why?" "Because it shows what you built, not just the house, the life, the family on your terms." I hung that painting in my bedroom where I could see it first thing every morning, a reminder that boundaries weren't about keeping people out, they were about choosing how to let them in. One April evening, I was cooking dinner when Danny called. "Mom and Dad want to sell the house," he said. "What?" "They want something smaller, easier to maintain." "Closer to Emma."
Oh, how do you feel about that? I thought about the house I'd grown up in, its cramped rooms and thin walls, the bedroom I'd shared with Danny, the kitchen where my mother had cried over bills, the basement where Danny had hidden from his failures. It had never felt like home, just a place we were stuck. I think it's good, I said. They should have something that's theirs, something they chose. Yeah, me too. He paused. They want to look at condos near you, not like next door, but in the area. That's fine. Really? Really. Being close isn't the same as being enmeshed. When did you get so wise? Therapy helps, I said, and we both laughed. They found a place in May, a 2-bedroom condo a mile inland with a community garden and a pool Emma could use when she got older. The day they moved in, we all helped, carrying boxes and furniture, setting up their new life. My mother cried, but not sadly. She stood in her new kitchen with its updated appliances and uncracked linoleum and cried with something that looked like relief. It's ours, she kept saying, really ours. I understood what she meant. Not just owned, but chosen. Not inherited dysfunction, but deliberate creation. That summer was the best we'd ever had as a family. Barbecues at my house, beach days with Emma, my parents babysitting so Danny and Lisa could have date nights. We were all different people than we'd been 3 years ago when I'd bought my house and they'd tried to force their way in. We'd learned to be family without being consumed by it. In August, on Emma's 2nd birthday, we had a party at my house. Friends and family, kids running everywhere, too much food, my father manning the grill while complaining about everyone's burger preferences. At one point, I found my mother sitting alone on my deck, watching the chaos. You okay? I asked, sitting beside her. Perfect, she said. I'm perfectly okay. You know, I spent so many years trying to control everything, make everyone happy, fix every problem. It was exhausting. This, being a guest at my granddaughter's party instead of the person responsible for everyone's feelings, it's so much better. Growth, I said, and she laughed. At my age? Any age. As the sun set, painting everything gold, I stood in my kitchen watching my family through the window. Danny was teaching Emma to throw a ball. Lisa was laughing at something my father had said. My mother was painting the scene, trying to capture the light. They were all here, in my space, on my terms, by my invitation, and I was happy to have them. But I was equally happy when they left. That's the thing about boundaries. They're not just about keeping people out. They're about creating a space that's so truly yours that you can share it without losing it. They're about knowing where you end and others begin, so you can choose to overlap without merging completely. That night, after the last guest had gone and I'd cleaned up the last of the party debris, I sat on my deck in the darkness listening to the ocean. 3 years in this house, and I'd finally learned what home meant. Not just a place that's yours, but a place where you can be yourself, where you can say yes or no, where you can open the door or lock it, where love isn't measured by how much access you give, but by how much truth you can share. My phone lit up with a text from my mother. Thank you for today, for everything. I love you. I texted back, I love you too. Then I put my phone away and sat in the darkness, in my house by the sea, the one I'd bought with my own money and defended with my own strength, and finally learned to share on my own terms. The waves rolled in and out, eternal and indifferent, but I wasn't listening to them anymore. I was listening to the quiet inside my own walls, the peace I'd fought for, the silence that wasn't empty, but full of choice, full of possibility, full of a life I'd built one boundary at a time. They called me Heartless for locking my doors, but that night, for the first time, I finally felt at home.